Hey guys, it's me. I just wanted to kind of introduce something that we're going to try. One of the things that I know I have myself struggled with is continuing the conversation from things week to week. And more than that, like unless I'm in a class in school or something like that, that's like expecting me to like cumulatively continue to build on what we talked about the last time we gathered or prepare for a test, a lot of times it is super easy to give into the temptation to just listen and then move on and not really do anything with it. So I'm actually going to be using something that I guess I'm testing this. A thing called Bloom's taxonomy, which is a very popular and common tool used in education to move people to deeper levels of understanding and mastery of material. And I really think there's an application with it in terms of our discipleship with Jesus. And so one of the things I want to try and just see if it helps. But again, I can't come to your house or look at you and say, you didn't do your homework. But this is definitely going to be one of those things that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. I believe that to be true. Basically, this past Sunday, we started this brand new series that we're looking at called Beyond the Wilderness. And what we're going to do is each day this week, I'm going to get on here for a really short amount of time. This one might be a little bit longer just to kind of explain what it is. But each day there'll be an element. There will be an element to interact with. So like Monday, for example, and you can kind of see this winding path. Like it goes really well, I think, with Beyond the Wilderness and the process of walking with Jesus. But Monday, recap the point from Sunday and introduce a new thought. And like you can take a look at that, but that's what we're going to do here today. We're just going to recap. Each day takes us hopefully one step further, one step maybe into another opportunity to interact with what we're talking about as a community and grow a little bit more, and not just for the sake of saying we read something or talked about something, but actually applying the things that the Holy Spirit is moving us to wrestle with and apply. And so that's what we're going to look at today. Just as a recap, this past Sunday, we started off we looked at the book of Exodus for most of the first half of our time together, and specifically Exodus 14 verses 10 through 16. And I want to highlight that one verse again. Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And I am really drawn to this. I said it. I mentioned it in our time together. I memorized this verse back in high school when I started taking my faith seriously. And actually, I remember exactly where I was. I was on a missions trip to Chicago. And I was memorizing it in the church van on the way to, I think, a baseball game, actually. It was one of our free nights, and we got tickets to the game. Anyway, that's not important. But the fact is, I remember memorizing this verse, and it's stuck with me ever since. But the cool thing about this is that word, or that phrase, you need only to be still, is really one word in Hebrew, and it's silence, cease. Very similar to the idea in Psalm 46:10, when God looks at all the chaos and all the nations fighting against each other and all the things happening, and he just looks at them and says, be still and know that I'm God, you are not, essentially. And so we looked at Exodus 14, where the Israelites have been brought out of Egypt, but they're between a rock and a hard place. The Red Sea in front of them, the people, the Pharaoh and his army pursuing them from the rear. And this is what God's instructions for them are in this midst of uncertainty and anxiety, and the wilderness lies ahead of them. He says, Moses reminds them, the Lord will fight for you. You know, just be still. Stop. Cease. Be silent. Stop complaining. And the reason I bring that up is because a little bit later in chapter 16, this is a common theme for the Israelite people. They complain a lot. I think the temptation from the enemy is to get us to focus on the things that we complain about, because it draws us away from all the things we actually have to be grateful for. And complaining drives a wedge in between our relationships with one another and a wedge between our relationships with Jesus. It really does. And so, but when I was walking through Exodus 16, I shared this verse from chapter 10, and the people are complaining and grumbling about their delicacies and their menu options that God has given them. And it says that they looked toward the desert, not back towards Egypt or anything like that, but they looked toward the desert, and there in the desert was the glory of the Lord appearing in a cloud. And so we looked at these and just kind of looked at the parallel of the fact that, yeah, we are in the midst of entering into a wilderness, yes, as during the season of Lent, but also in this new chapter of Direction Church, because none of us have the context of meeting in house churches, and so like to venture out and follow in step and obey what Jesus has been asking us to do, there's a lot of unknown for that. And so with that being said, we then moved into the idea or to the conversation of what does this next chapter look like for us as Direction Church. We are just one group of believers of Jesus. We are just one group of a part of the church as a whole. Like, we are not the church only ourselves. And so, but we talked about how we're going to be challenged in ways that we haven't before, but we also have a lot of opportunities that we might not have ever had before. And looking forward and embracing it and remembering the fact that whenever you're in a wilderness, you have to remember that's not the end. That's not the end all. But there's a question. There's two questions that I think that we would do well to develop the habit to ask. The first one is what's God trying to reveal to me, or maybe he's trying to get me to pay attention to in this season, in this barren wilderness season, maybe the season of Lent, maybe literally in this new chapter of how we are going to be as a community of Direction Church. And the second question is what is he inviting me in my obedience to? I think we would do really well to ask those questions, or get in the habit of asking those questions when we face uncertainty, when we realize we are in a wilderness season. And then the first part is to know that the wilderness is not the end. It always leads to something, hence the name Beyond the Wilderness. So one of the biggest things, and we'll lean into this a little bit tomorrow, but I think one of the things that we as a church community have been growing in, but I have a hope and a desire and a dream to see us really lean in and embrace more, is a posture of vulnerability with one another. And so that being said, I want to add one new thought to this, and it comes from Matthew chapter 9. And I want you to think about this. I'm going to read it. It's on here on the screen, but I'm going to read it, and I want you to think about this in relation to everything we talked about and allow this to percolate in your minds a little bit. In Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 14, it reads this: Then John's disciples came and asked him, How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Jesus answered, How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. And the behind that word is a sense of forcibly and against their wishes. The bridegroom is taken, not just he leaves. So there will come a time, or the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and they will fast. And then Jesus says this thing in verse 16. He says, No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. And neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. And the thing I want to challenge you to think about in conjunction with looking back at those pieces of the Exodus story and about what we've been talking about, what God might be inviting us to walk in step with his Spirit in this new chapter, this new season, and through this wilderness to beyond the wilderness. What is the new for us that God's wanting to maybe have us understand and learn? But if we keep holding on to the old, or if we keep holding on to the way things were in Egypt, to parallel with the Israelites in Exodus, to long to go back to the old, what is God wanting? What might he be wanting to reveal and have us do and join in with what he's doing in this community and in this world? That if we hold on to the old and we're always looking back, we will be ill-equipped and unable to receive. And so I want to leave that with you. I purposefully have been spreading these out throughout the week to continue the conversation and to continue allowing each of us to learn and process this and maybe even wrestle with this at our own pace. But I would really encourage you, reach out to somebody, talk about your thoughts on this. Don't do this in isolation. So take some time here today, maybe tonight, maybe even later this week if you watch this later, but take some time to process through what might God be asking us to do, that if we hold on and keep looking back to the old, we will be unable to receive. Thanks, guys. I will be back on here tomorrow, and hopefully we will all be able to process each of these things and continue in our moving up Bloom's taxonomy, not for the sake of sounding smart, but for the sake of being more faithful. As Paul says, that the hope is to bring people to the obedience of faith, and I would add, and I'm sure he would too, into a truer, fuller expression of life to the full of a relationship with Jesus that he came to give, as he said in John chapter 10. So thanks, guys. Love you all, and I'll see you next time.